What's up YouTube, and welcome to the Anabolic Outpost. In this edition I will be bringing to you my Anabolic cottage cheese pudding. As you could have guessed it from the name, this recipe has a strong base of cottage cheese, which makes it a great recipe for the Anabolic Outpost. It also does have some regular pudding mix in there as well as some protein powder, giving to you the perfect anabolic high protein pudding recipe for your diet. There are a lot of other ingredients in there too, and I will be breaking them down right now. The first ingredient, like I mentioned, is the protein powder, and the flavor of this powder really depends on what you're really going for your pudding. Personally, I would probably match it with your pudding mix flavor, but you might be able to find some unique and interesting combinations for your different flavors of pudding, whichever you like. I am using a vanilla pudding mix and kind of going for that vanilla flavor, so I am using vanilla myself. Also remember, if you are using a casein blend, you are going to get a lot thicker of pudding versus a whey blend where it's going to be a thinner sort of pudding. Next, we are moving on to another familiar ingredient I've already mentioned in this video, which is the fat-free cottage cheese. Next thing on the screen here is the sucralose. You could use whatever sweetener you'd like, just be sure to do the proper conversions with sucralose. Next thing is fat-free milk. Once again, you could use a different milk if you'd like. Then we have the sugar-free, fat-free Jello mix. I am using the vanilla Jello mix because I am going for the vanilla pudding. Next thing is the xanthan gum. This really makes the pudding expand and gives a good pudding texture. Some powdered peanut butter is going into this recipe as well for some extra protein. You hardly even notice the peanut butter flavor. Now we got some vanilla on the screen as well. If you are doing like a chocolate sort of pudding, you might want to consider doing cocoa powder as well. But because I'm doing vanilla, I have added vanilla to this recipe. First thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to blend it all together, starting off like any good blending would by blending the dry ingredients together first. And that first dry ingredient is going to be the protein powder, and I'm adding 33 grams of it, which does sound quite low, but with the amount of cottage cheese and milk in this, there's going to be no lack of protein, so please do not worry. Next thing I'm adding in is the Jello pudding mix, and I've conveniently made this recipe where the entire package is needed for the recipe. It is also 24 grams if you were curious. And I actually didn't even mean to catch this on camera, but I'm glad my scale caught it. As you can see, or if you can't see, I'm going to zoom in pretty closely here. My scale says 37.8 grams, which if you recall just a few minutes ago, I had just said that the box of Jello is going to be 24 grams. And luckily, this is just a box of Jello, and it is sugar-free and fat-free. It is barely any calories, and probably just going to make the Jello a little bit better. But this box was way more than 24 grams. So they're portioning at the factory or something is off. But this is just a good example of something that you have to be aware with. If you're tracking calories, it's not always going to weigh the exact same as what the can or the box or the serving says. You have to make sure to weigh it out, and even then, your calories are still going to be incredibly hard to track, which is why I personally do not track my calories. And you don't have to be super precise with this recipe because it is pudding after all, and adding pudding mix to pudding isn't going to kill it. So don't end up having like a 1/20th bag left of Jello in your pantry just because it wasn't exactly 24 grams. And as I was just talking about that, I just added 2 grams of sucralose. Based on whatever sweetener you're going to use, you're just going to have to convert it and see how much sweetener you should add for yourself. Sucralose is a 1-to-1 substitute though, if that helps you at all. Now I'm going to throw some PB2 up in there, or whatever powdered peanut butter you have, and I am adding in 24 grams of that. And last but far from least for the dry ingredients is the xanthan gum, and for this recipe I am adding in 5 grams. This is super essential to the bonding structure of the pudding because it really gives you that pudding texture, because xanthan gum, if you didn't know, helps things expand, and with the protein powder and cottage cheese and all that stuff in there, although there is pudding mix already in there, the xanthan gum really helps aid it in really getting you that pudding texture. And like I said, I am going to make sure that the dry ingredients are evenly mixed together before we add in the cottage cheese, milk, and vanilla. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it through a quick spin cycle. Alright, it is now time for the wet ingredients, and I'm going to go ahead and add in my cottage cheese, and you are going to need 500 grams of this stuff, which is nearly your entire, depending on how big of a container you get. So trust me when I said that there is going to be no lack of protein on this one. And if you're wondering how cottage cheese really matches up in pudding, it kind of seems like a weird thing to make out of, but I really think it is a great way to make pudding because it's kind of that same slimy texture as pudding is already, and when you grind it up, it gives you a little bit of a salty taste, but you really don't notice it like you would think like cheese in pudding would taste like. And before I add the milk, I am going to hit this pit of ingredients with 10 grams of vanilla. Like I said in the intro, this really is kind of optional depending on what flavor of pudding you're going for. I added the vanilla because it is vanilla pudding. If you're using chocolate though, you would probably want to use like cocoa powder. And there's a bunch of different extracts out there, so depending on the flavor, you might want to use that kind of extract. Like a caramel pudding, I know there's caramel extract, and that would probably be perfect for this. Now I am finally adding in the last ingredient, and this is going to be the milk. I am adding in 720 grams of milk, which seems like a goddamn awful lot, and I'm only adding 240 grams here, and basically the entire thing is milk, but I'm just adding the 240 grams right now, and then I'm going to continue, and then once it is blended up just a little bit, add in the rest of the 480 grams. And you could now see here that the blender is noticeably much more fuller. Mine takes it nearly to the brim with all the milk that is in this recipe. And you can now see here once I'm done blending what this kind of consistency looks like. And don't worry, this pudding takes a while to sit. It's going to be about 4 to 6 hours before it is ready for consumption. So don't really worry if it's looking pretty thin right now. It's going to thicken up and give you that pudding texture. Just be sure to transfer to a fridge safe container, and then you could go ahead and put this in the fridge to cool for 4 to 6 hours. And here we go. This is what the final product is going to look like the night after. You could now see that the pudding has hardened up, and it is that thick pudding consistency that you are really looking for when you're in the mood for some good old-fashioned pudding. And now that the recipe part is over, it is now time for the macro part. We're going to start it out with 160 grams of protein, 74 grams of carbs, only 4 grams of fat, for a total of 885 calories for the whole thing. Now obviously you're not going to eat the whole thing, but per serving, if you divide this up by 8, it's going to still give you 15 grams of protein, which is pretty damn good for some pudding. As well as the fat content too. When you think of some good pudding, there's definitely going to be some fat in there, but for only half a gram of fat per serving, this is essentially a fat-free pudding. It is very nice to just binge on late night and still stay on track. You could have a few servings of this and you still won't surpass the amount of calories that you will have while eating a normal dessert, or for that matter a normal pudding. That is all I have for you today for this video though. I hope you take some great knowledge home for you after watching this video. I would also like to take this time to apologize if my voice was a little bit scratchy for this video. I'm currently recovering from some sort of flu or something, so that explains it, and that also explains why I missed one upload yesterday, just so I could still be on track and have my uploads here. I wasn't sure how sick I was going to be, so not gonna lie, I probably was still going to upload, but I was only out for like 3 days, and if I was out for like a whole week, I would definitely be a little bit behind on my recipe schedule. But that is all I have for you, like I already said. If you had any questions or were confused at anything regarding this process, I will be happy to answer any and all questions down below in the comments. But if you got something of use out of this video today and enjoyed this delicious recipe, be sure to like and subscribe. It really means a lot to this growth of my channel and really warms my heart as well. Thank you for watching.